Roll for Crit is made possible thanks to the support of viewers like you and our patrons on our Patreon page.
You can become a patron for just $1 a month at patreon.com/rollforcrit. You're watching Roll for Crit. Today, we're bringing you our review of a game called Kawa, a game about flow, as it is tagged underneath that title on the box. And it is a game about flow, flowing down a river as you are all friends gathered at a riverside, and you are tossing flower petals gently into the river, watching them flow from one side to the other, and trying to gain more points than they can along the way.
The game will start off with a 4x4 grid of cards that look like this. This is your river. And you may notice these little white lines that lead across the cards. That is the flow on that particular part of the river. So sometimes it may flow just straight forward downstream, maybe a little up towards the left bank or to the right bank, the top or bottom, so to speak. And of course, maybe some other special goodies along the way. Now, at the start of each round, depending on the turn order tracker, that person will place their petal card along the left side of the river. Once everyone has done so, it will now go in reverse order of being able to swap two adjacent tiles, then starting where their petal card is, placing the petals along the river, following the direction of the cards. So, for example, if they started on a card that let them pass straight through, they'd put a petal on that card, then to the next card to the right of that card. And if that card then said go to the upper left, they'd put a petal on that card, then go to the upper left, so on and so forth. Now, if there are other petals on the card, that's where scoring comes in. When you're going to put a petal on a card that already contains other petals, the people who have petals there score points. So if you are the only one who had a petal there, you get a point. If you had two, you get 2 points. If other people are there, they would score as well. So part of this is all about not only trying to spread out your own petals, but to land on your own and get some points without giving your opponent too many points. You'll continue in this reverse order until everyone has had a chance to flow their petals downstream.
There are some special tiles that you'll be running into. First, there will always be the whirlpools, and those act just like normal tiles, but once you have left it, you will have to rotate it to a new direction. As long as it's not flowing backwards towards the source of the river, you can rotate it however you want, so that's going to be changing things around a little bit. And then each game you're going to have 2 special tiles. There are basic ones and advanced ones, and you can throw them into each game, choose a couple randomly, or tailor them as you see fit if there are specific ones that you like, and they will have all kinds of different effects. For example, there are the sparrows. If someone lands in the sparrows, then whoever has the least points gains a point. There is the crab. The crab will swap itself with the card next to it, depending on which side its claw is facing. So that's going to be moving around and changing the state of the board even more so. There's a number of other tiles that might change how things are scored, might result in players getting new or different tokens that they have to think about. So while the game is very basic for the most part in terms of its gameplay, throwing those into the mix will change things up quite a bit. You play for 4 rounds, and at the end of each round, the last column of the board will also be reshuffled and added back to the beginning. Nothing's ever going to stay constant in this one. Again, it's all about flow. Things are going to be changing. You really have to be aware of what's going on. Even at the start of a round, before you're placing your starting card, if you're not the first player, other players are going to be doing their swapping before you get a chance to start putting your petals out onto the field. So you really have to plan ahead carefully, but also be ready for things to change on you.
It really is interesting in that way. And by the way, we should mention that depending on the player order, that will rotate too at the end of each round. So you won't always be first. It will always swap things out. And there's also removing petals depending on your placement there, or being able to get an extra swap. The game is simply that, you're just going to keep putting down petals, and it really does change depending on those special tiles. Some of them will make you lose points. Some of them will add pretty much a special token that will move around the river and gain people points if they land on it. So that can change the pun sort of intended here, the flow of the game and the strategies.
Yeah, I think what's really interesting about it, one of the big things for me is how you score specifically, because it was a little hard for me to wrap my head around at first. Because you don't score like the first time that you take your turn, you're probably not going to get any points depending on which tiles are in play, because you don't place your token until after you've already scored that specific tile. So that's something to consider. And then in the future, once you have more of your tokens out already, that's when things become interesting. And also, you're worrying about other players, because if you land on a tile that someone else put their tokens on, you're scoring them points too, whether you want to or not. So you can try to really focus up and like put a bunch of tokens in one place and make that your awesome place to score points, or you can spread yourself around and hope that it forces other players to have to land onto your spots and score for you. There's different ways that you can do it, and I found that really just the process of planning out your routes and trying to envision it is kind of satisfying. It reminded me a little bit of Sorrow. Same sort of an idea as when you kind of are charting your path through something. Very, very simple game. Like once you know what you're going to do, you kind of just follow your path and you just see what happens. But it's all that beforehand that you have to think everything out.
It's very interesting because with lower player counts, it really is all about how do I make sure I can get the most points and not have my opponent score anything or not land on theirs. But at higher, because there's so many players, it becomes less about like how do I make sure no one scores, to be more like I'll give points to Jonathan because he's behind. I don't want to give it to Will because he's way ahead, kind of deal. And it's like almost a different mindset to how you navigate because everyone's already on the board, and it changes how powerful certain positions are. Like honestly, in a 2-player game, it stinks going first because you put your one tile down, but the other person still has 3 slots available, and then they're going to drop their pedals before you. But in a 4-player game, that's pretty good because whoever's going last only has one available place to put them in. So that may force them to give everyone else a lot of points. It's very weird how different the player count changes that alone, you know.
Yeah, there is an option in the game where you can, if with 2 players, both of you would just play as 2 flowers and you alternate turns with 2 different colors of petals. So I think that if you want that experience, it's very easy to replicate. I don't think that really doesn't change the gameplay at all, as long as you like once you're in the flow, once you understand like
You can't avoid the pun. It's too good.
once you like get the basic idea of the game down after a game or two, I think that might even be the preferable way to play if you're going to play this with just 2 players. But especially with all the different special cards that can go in there, those can really help mix things up and make it more interesting in terms of how players are going to interact and how often they're going to be interacting. You could also play a game without any of them if you want to, just have an even more basic experience.
You could, but I definitely would not because I think some of the fun of this game is the swapping, and at least maybe not all of them swap, but having one that does some weird swapping, like in the example, the crab, it's always going to move. And it just becomes hilarious because it can really change up what's going on. And that really makes people have to be like, okay, well, the crab's going there then. So if I swap this, that makes this weird. You know, I think if you play some games, you'll never want to play without some of the advanced tiles. Crits and misses for Kawa.
Crits. Planning out your path in such a way as to maximize your point gain while minimizing point gain of your opponents can be a tricky puzzle that is pretty satisfying to solve. There are several special tiles to add into the mix, and each of them brings its own special flavor that's going to greatly change your strategy and the way the game feels.
The way it changed your strategy was surprising to me. It really did affect whether I want to clump up my pedals or try to leave them out for longer or maybe do some other things to block or work with opponents. Misses. We enjoyed these specialty cards as they help form your strategies early on and change them up between games. However, sometimes, depending on which ones you're using, it could make it so you're not trying to interact too much with each other. This was much more prevalent in the 2-player count, where sometimes we weren't even interacting with each other at all until the very end.
At a lower player count, you will probably want to use the variant in which you use 2 different flower petals per player, or specifically pick your special tiles so that they encourage you to engage with each other more often. Kawa is available right now, and it is not a game that I think a lot of people are talking about. It was sent to us by the publisher, and we had a good time playing it, and I feel like it's one that could go under the radar, but I think it is deserving of you taking a look at it. If you like something kind of akin to a Suro style game, it's light, it's small, fits in a very small box. Even though, we had some qualms about the 2-player mode, I think with the different variations, it still works very well for 2 to 4 players. This is a pretty easy one to recommend if you're interested in something that will have you thinking a little bit, but doesn't take too long to play, isn't too taxing, and has a really nice gameplay loop to it that I liked a lot.
I definitely suggest this if you're the kind of person who meets up in groups of like 3 or 4 often going out, because it's so small. And even though it has a lot of the small pieces and the pedals, I don't think that's too bad. It's nothing that I think would be a problem if you brought it to to a restaurant while you're waiting for the food to arrive. I think it'd be the perfect strategy game that also is like enough of that you're thinking it doesn't feel too simple that a lot of small games that size might feel like.
Yeah, no, it definitely has that. There's definitely times when you kind of feel like your brain could burn a little bit if you are trying to calculate every possible path, especially with more players that you add. But then once you are into it, it's just kind of like it almost plays. It's like you set the pieces in place, but then it sort of just does its own thing. And in that way, it kind of mimics an actual river. So like I like the theme. I think it's a nice mix with the mechanics, and it's got some really nice, just pleasant artwork. It's just kind of a relaxing, light game. I think they should add 2 eyes to the end of the title because it's kawaii.
Be careful. I'm terrible with language, but I do know that one word, depending on how you slightly pronounce it, could actually mean scary, which I guess is thematically when this video is coming up right now.
No, it's kawaii, meaning cute in Japanese, of course. Anyway, the game is called Kawa, and we recommend you go take a look at it if you have the opportunity. It's out there right now. You can let us know in the comments if you have had the chance to try it for yourself, what special tiles you dug or didn't dig so much. Talk to us, or maybe just give us share your memories with us of sitting by a riverside and enjoying the breeze as you throw flowers into it.
I think we could all use that moment of peace right now.
Sounds good. Until that moment of peace comes, I'm Jonathan.
I'm Will.
This was Roll for Crit.
Support our Patreon, like this video, and subscribe to our channel so you don't miss a thing.
Watch more of our content now to hold back Cthulhu's madness.